And welcome back to Jerusalem Minute here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News. I'm here in studio with Alex Traiman, CEO of JNS. We are in beautiful Jerusalem. Hope you're well. Hope you're safe in your part of the world. Let's get right to it, Alex. President-elect Donald Trump, making his selections in various positions this week, a lot of them deemed to be pro-Israel, including former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee as U.S. Ambassador to Israel, real estate mogul Stephen Witkoff, special envoy to the Middle East, Representative Elise Stefanik as ambassador to the UN. You remember her. She took on those professors from all the various universities in terms of their unwillingness to combat anti-Semitism on campus. Also, Republican Mike Walz, national security advisor, a lot of great promotions, a lot of great names.
Yeah, also Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, Pete Hegseth is a great guy, and I know a lot of people were taking him to task on social media or whatnot, saying, what experience does he have? Look what we have now, a four-star general. But number one, he served for many, many years in Iraq.
20 years. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's number one. Number two is he gets it. I mean, he was here in Israel just a few years ago. The guy gets it. I think he's going to make an excellent selection. What's your overall take on the rest of these picks, including, let's start with Huckabee?
Well, you can't get more pro-Israel than Huckabee. And I would say that there were probably some people here that thought that David Friedman might get reappointed. Maybe even David Friedman might have thought he might have gotten reappointed to the position. But Huckabee is an absolutely great selection for a number of reasons. First of all, I mean, he's a two-term governor of Arkansas. He knows how to get things done. He's a highly competent individual. Second, he's been on media for the last decades. So he's not going to say things that he shouldn't say. And more importantly, he's led, I don't know how many, dozens at least of missions to Israel. He's been to Israel so many times. The land means something to him. And I think what's the most important component here is that he's an evangelical Christian. He's not Jewish, right? So you've seen over the last several cycles, many times Jews be selected for this job, like Jack Lew, who's leaving, who I think was like a mostly a non-factor, except maybe that he was probably part of some of these sanctions regimes, but publicly he was much of a non-factor. Tom Nides, who was like to schmooze everybody, and then you had David Friedman here before that. Huckabee has the advantage actually of not being Jewish, and the advantage is nobody's going to claim that there's any dual loyalty here. But more important than that is that America's support for Israel, by and large, and I know a lot of American Jews don't want to hear this, but the Congress's support for the state of Israel, the main bedrock of support for the state of Israel at this point in the United States happens to be pro-Israel Christians. And unfortunately, I think a lot of Jews and Jewish organizations don't know how to deal with that, and they haven't made the right inroads that they should with this community. And I think that Mike Huckabee is going to be the perfect bridge. He's really going to galvanize the support of pro-Israel Christians for the state of Israel. And I think also that the Jewish organizations are going to have a great time working with him as well.
I spent some time with Governor Huckabee when he was here in Israel just last year. And, this is a person who refers to the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria by their actual name, Judea and Samaria. He doesn't say West Bank. He says there's no such thing as a Palestinian. There's no Palestinian people. These are Arabs. Arabs are from Arabia. Jews are from Judea. And he's also very, very strongly against a so-called two-state solution. I know a lot of people have woken up after the realities of October 7th and are also against a two-state solution. I mean, I don't know how much more pro-Israel you can get than Huckabee and the rest of the picks.
Right. And when you talk to people, especially those in Florida, and there's a lot of JNS listeners out there in Florida and JNS supporters in Florida. So if you're in Florida, here's a shout out. They say Marco Rubio is the most pro-Israel senator you can get. He's probably the most of the establishment type picks that Trump made. This is a long-term senator serving. He plays the part. He's more seen as more moderate than some of the other picks. I think he's going to be a great Secretary of State for the state of Israel. It's going to be a very different mood when he comes here than when Antony Blinken was coming here. But then when you look at some of the other picks, like Pete Hegseth, and then you look at some of the other picks in other areas, even as they might not relate to Israel, such as RFK Jr. for Secretary of Health, and then you have some other picks like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy in this newly created Department of Government Efficiency, and some of these other picks that he's made. They're disruptor picks. It's very clear that President-elect Trump is now going to attack the deep state. He's going to go after it hard. He's going to go after all of the bureaucracy and corruption inside the Department of Defense, inside the Departments of Health and the FDA and all of those other areas. And I think, as you saw in his first term, he really disrupted the paradigms that we had here regarding the Middle East and the two-state solution. He completely defunded the Palestinian Authority and all of the agencies that support it, including UNRWA and others. He kicked the PLO mission out of Washington. I mean, these were unheard of things that he did. He said, no, we're going to move the capital to Jerusalem. We're going to say that the settlements in Judea and Samaria are not necessarily illegal, and we're going to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal, which is everything that Obama and all these characters like Jake Sullivan and Blinken and Biden were all part of this Iran nuclear deal, and that's what they wanted. And that's the reason why we're in this mess today, in no large part. So he's going to disrupt. And the Abraham Accords was the biggest disruption of all, because you had here, if you remember, Secretary Kerry, the former Secretary of State under Obama, saying no, there's no way you can ever make peace with the Arab countries before you make peace with the Palestinians. And Trump said, I can disrupt all of that. So I think you're going to see a major disruption. But of course, disrupting doesn't go easily all the time. It went actually pretty easily here in the Middle East when he was president the first time. I don't know, as he attacks these various bureaucracies that are very entrenched, if it's going to go as easily.
There was a joke on Twitter that the United States was going to sanction Israel for not being right-wing enough. And we were talking about this before, even though that's kind of a joke. Actually, it's kind of, somewhat of a reality here. While the United States is moving in one direction, you have those forces and elements here in Israel who are trying to take down our right-wing establishment.
Exactly. I think that's totally spot on. You see Donald Trump now saying, I'm going to break down all of these bureaucracies. And here in Israel, the bureaucracies are saying, we've got to get Netanyahu out. And they've been trying to get Netanyahu out for years, right? Remember, we had like 5 election cycles in 5 years' time. Okay. And then you had the judicial reform protest, and they thought that was going to get Netanyahu out. And then October 7th happened, and the same movements thought this is definitely going to get Netanyahu out. And what has emerged? Here we are about 13 months after October 7th. And Netanyahu is actually stronger than ever. He's got the majority right-wing government he should have had from the beginning with 68 seats. He just kicked the only dissenter out of his cabinet in Yoav Gallant. He's very sturdy right now. And so what you're seeing is now all of a sudden the protest movement is back up. They threw flares in Netanyahu's house.
I was going to say 3 anarchists last night. I think they were taken into custody
as part of a protest.
Yeah, shot flares at his home. He wasn't home at the time. His family wasn't there. But this is what they're doing.
The Attorney General and the Justice Department here going after the Prime Minister. They're going after the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. They're going after other people's in his office.
The
spokesperson, right? They're going after Itamar Ben-Gvir with the Attorney General saying that, warning Netanyahu that he should fire his minister. When Netanyahu fired Gallant, the Attorney General was, a little bit skittish, and perhaps she wasn't able to come out and say that Netanyahu can't fire Gallant, because she's trying to tell Netanyahu to fire Ben-Gvir at the same time. So we're seeing this reverse force. And I think that one of the things that you have to look at in Netanyahu's tenure, and he's been the prime minister, I guess now we're coming up on 17 years in total, is that he's actually preferred not to try to take down these bureaucracies. And this is the state of bureaucracies here in Israel. And he's chosen, by and large, to not attack, to kick the can down the road. What's the one exception, of course? The judicial reforms.
Right.
And he tried to completely change in one go the way that the court functions, the way the justices pick themselves. And what happened? He got crushed. Netanyahu got crushed when he tried to attack the Justice Department. So it's not as easy to go after it here the way Trump's going to go after it in the United States. But maybe Netanyahu and his government are going to look at what's happening now in the United States. They're going to carefully notice the types of disruptions that are going to take place there. And maybe they will get re-inspired to try to take down some of these bureaucracies here at home.
I heard on the radio this morning, even Minister Yariv Levin said that he's going to put the justice reform issue back on the agenda, and immediately you had the leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid, go after him, attack him.
Well, that's his job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll have to see how it plays out and see how it compares now after in this new October 7th reality to what it was last summer. Let's also mention that apparently Jared Kushner is back in the picture here. Former White House senior advisor Jared Kushner reportedly expected to play a key role in the crafting and implementation of his father-in-law's Middle East policy over the next couple of years. So let's see what role Jared Kushner has.
They had so much momentum.
Yeah.
At the end of the first Trump term with the Abraham Accords, they were saying as many as 5 countries or more were right on the verge of signing these agreements. But then what happened? The Biden administration came in and they slowed down the entire progress. It looks like Jared Kushner is not going to have the same type of senior role that he had in the president's first term, but it looks like he might have this kind of Middle Eastern, not exactly the envoy, because I guess that's going to Steve Witkoff, who I know less about than some of the others. By the way, Stefanik is just a perfect choice for a UN ambassador. I mean, you saw the way she attacked those. She's not playing presidents. I mean, she's going to take it right to the UN. I think it's a great pick. If Kushner's back, I mean, he had this out of the box thinking, which actually led to the signing of the Abraham Accords. Saudi is right back on the table. The only thing you have to look out for is that in some way, shape, or form, Kushner does seem to support a Palestinian entity, whether that's like a state minus, like Netanyahu and Dermer like to call it, or some kind of emirate, as other people talk about. And I think that's dangerous right now. Though there was an interview that Kushner did, I guess, in the last year, in fact, after October 7th. And he did say in that interview that a Palestinian state at this time would be the ultimate reward for October 7th, and it can't happen, and it's a bad idea.
I think it was a Twitter post. I think it was a long post that he put that made headlines around the world. And by the way, just I wouldn't say ironically, I don't believe in coincidence, but this morning on my Facebook feed, a story from 3 years ago popped up. And it was an article that I wrote on JNS.org talking about how Israel was on the verge of normalization. Okay, so that's where we were several years ago, and obviously, as a result of the policies of the Biden administration, that did not become a reality. Now it's much more a reality that Trump's going to take over.
Not only did normalization happen, but war happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so we're in a horrific war on the basis of really bad policies. Bring the Palestinians back to the table. Slowing down the Abraham Accords. Going back into relationship with Iran. This is what happened. Okay. And it's, we had to kind of hedge our bets here in Israel and play nice with the Biden administration while they were in office, because they were the only U.S. administration that we had to work with at the time. But now that we see that the American people have voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, we have to recognize that A, we can call out all of the bad behavior of the previous administration, B, get back on track of where we were, but C, recognize that there might be a very small window of opportunity to make irreversible gains in the Middle East. Remember, the Abraham Accords only happened toward the end of the Trump first term, okay? We don't have time, okay? We have to do everything that we can do now in this 4-year period. And because of that, I think that now is the time for Netanyahu to really, and maybe we'll wait a few weeks, okay? I understand there's still an administration in place. We have to wait a little bit.
60 days to go.
You know, I can hear Minister Ron Dermer talking about running down the clock. We'll talk about that in a minute too on another issue, but I think it's going to be time. You're going to see where Prime Minister Netanyahu and Ron Dermer and the newly appointed ambassador to the United States, Yechiel Leiter, are going to be laying out, and Gideon Sa'ar, who's also the newly appointed foreign minister, are going to be laying out in greater detail what total victory looks like, right? You've heard the Prime Minister talk about total victory, but he's never really gone on to say too much about what that total victory might look like. Why? Because the Biden administration opposes the whole concept of total victory and all the details that could be under it. So Netanyahu is going to have to start to talk about, what does total victory look like in Gaza? Does that include allowing for the first time Gazan refugees to leave the Strip if that's what they want to do? Okay. Does it include potentially taking some land in the northern section of the Gaza Strip back to Israel? Does that include putting in a provisional military government that Israel controls inside the Gaza Strip for whatever time that's going to be, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, to make sure that the humanitarian aid is actually going to where it's supposed to go, making sure that any monies that come in for rebuilding the Gaza Strip are tied to the concept of de-radicalization, right? So there's a lot of things that could be. You might also see a totally different approach where maybe the Trump administration is going to come in and say, hey, you know what? The previous administration wanted humanitarian aid to go in there. Well, we also want humanitarian aid to go in there if you give back the hostages. If you don't give back the hostages, there's not going to be any more humanitarian aid.
Something we should have done from day one.
Easy, right? But we couldn't do it from day one.
Yeah,
we couldn't do it. Okay. And the Netanyahu and Dermer decided early on that they had to give something to the United States in order to fight back against these charges of genocide at the International Court of Justice and to prevent the stoppage of weapons flow into Israel. So they said, okay, the least of the evils is putting food into Gaza. And so they would facilitate it. And that's what they did. But maybe now everything is going to change. What does total victory mean in Lebanon, Josh? The same way that they talked about Hamas no longer being a political and a military force in Gaza, the same thing should hold true in Lebanon. They should totally degrade Hezbollah's military capabilities. We'll talk about that again in a second. And they should kick Lebanon out of the government. I mean, they kick Hezbollah out of the Lebanese government. They're a party to the parliament. And it could be very easy for President Trump to say, listen, we're going to put terrible sanctions on this entire country until you kick Hezbollah out of your parliament, right? They'll kick them out of the parliament. That's what they have to do. So these things, like, what does total victory mean? Netanyahu hasn't said. He's been very coy about it. I think now with Trump coming back into office, we're going to start to hear what it means. And of course, the last thing there is the Iranian nuclear reactors.
Yeah, and let's get to Iran. Number one here, we have several stories here concerning Iran. This regarding Iran and President Trump, according to the Wall Street Journal over the weekend, Iran offered written assurances to the Biden administration that it would not seek to kill President Trump. Again, I think you have to take it with a grain of salt. I don't know how much Iran's word is worth. Even if they
also take in agreeing with salt how good Wall Street Journal's reporting is. There's a lot of fake news going on out there.
But this was out there over the weekend. Iranian message delivered on the 14th of October, previously not reported for one reason or another, came in response to a private message written, a private American warning sent to Tehran in September by the Biden administration, warning them about Trump if this is accurate. You're right.
Because the Biden administration Justice Department put out notice that they had intelligence that Iran was trying to assassinate Donald Trump.
Yeah, we talked about it on the show a few weeks ago.
And this is the Biden administration, Steve. It's not Trump saying that that they're trying to kill me. That would be one thing. Here you have the Biden administration's Justice Department saying we have intelligence that Iran's trying to kill Trump. Okay, so now Iran is sending out notes that say, no, well, guess what? Even if we're not going to try anymore to kill Trump, rest assured, because they're scared, right?
Absolutely.
They were talking, maybe we talked about this on the show last week. They were talking about potentially doing a third ballistic missile strike against Israel in the week before the election, on the day of the election. Donald Trump won the election. They've called off the strike.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they're backing down for sure. This is the Middle East, folks.
So simple. I mean, and for people,
strength wins out.
What can you do to deter Iran? The Biden administration was saying, well, we can't be certain that we're going to hold Israel back if you attack them. Right. And then all these reports that the Biden administration was leaking details of the Israeli attack to Iran.
Some sort of Pentagon official.
Donald Trump doesn't even say anything. And here they're cowering and saying, well, we're not going to try to assassinate him, so don't try to assassinate us, right? And, we were going to attack Israel, but maybe now we won't. Okay, it's that simple, right? And people always like to say the Middle East is not black and white. Everything is gray. The liberals always say this. So they say everything is it's complicated. It's not that complicated, okay? In the Middle East, everybody respects strength. Okay, fear is an important component. Okay, that's how it has to work. The other nations, the enemies of the Jewish people, have to fear the Jewish people. If they fear Israel, there will be peace. If Israel fears them, there will be war. It really is black and white when it comes to
a lot of these people think that you're dealing with the United States-Canadian border or the U.S.-Canadian relationship, and that's not the way it works here in the Middle East. People have to wake up and realize that reality. At the same time, we talked a lot about Israel's strike on Iran just last month, and apparently Israel did, in fact, target a secret Iranian nuclear facility. According to reports, Israeli airstrikes on Iran last month destroyed a secret nuclear weapons research facility in Parchin, that's 19 miles southeast of Tehran. Although President Biden asked Jerusalem not to target Tehran's nuclear facilities, this site was chosen specifically because it was not part of their declared nuclear program. I guess they have this declared nuclear program, which is supposed to be, only up to a certain degree and for peaceful purposes and all this other nonsense that they claim. But this site, according to these officials, which Israel struck, was in fact part of their nuclear program. So in other words, what we did was actually target their nuclear facilities, more or less.
Gosh, it wasn't just a nuclear research facility, okay? This was a facility where they were testing explosives that you need to create nuclear devices, right? We already understand that Iran has enriched enough uranium to get to a bomb. The question is, can they deliver it, right? And so can they, we saw these 20-meter long ballistic missiles.
They have the abilities,
right?
They have missiles,
right? So they have the missiles, but to fit the warhead on the missile and to be able to detonate it and create the nuclear explosion, this is something that it's been reported, and we can't know exactly what reports we should believe and not, but it's been reported that the difficulty is in the weaponization. And here, this was a facility that was an illicit facility that was working specifically on the explosive device of the nuclear weapon. So Israel hits this. Why was Israel able to hit it? Because the Biden administration said, don't hit the nuclear sites, right? Well, guess what? Here's a list of all the nuclear sites. This Parchin site wasn't on the list of the nuclear sites. So, okay, we won't hit the sites that are on the list. And here they go, and they hit a site, I think it's a very, very strong signal to the Iranians that Israel really does know where all these facilities are. At the same time, now Israel has to figure out what its policy is going to be over the next 60 days and is laying out the strategy for what it will do once the Trump administration goes into office. Is Israel now going to take out the other facilities? Is Israel going to try to work with the United States to take out these facilities together? Which my analysis is that Israel probably is waiting for the United States, both for the diplomatic cover, but even potentially for the creation of a short-term military alliance between Israel and the United States to take out these facilities. Why? Because the United States has the bunker-busting technology that Israel doesn't have. If you want to take these things out faster, cleaner, so you need the American weapons. And certainly the Biden administration wasn't never going to give those types of weapons to Israel. But the United States has them, and let's see if they're going to use them.
This is breaking news just in the last couple hours here. The Ayatollah Khamenei, there are rumors circulating that he is in a coma, perhaps. He's 85 years old. And if he's in fact still alive, there are rumors out there that perhaps he is in fact dead and the leadership is being turned over to his son, from what I understand. Again, nothing has been confirmed as of now, and it's very hard to know, what the reality is, especially coming out of a country like Iran.
More and more reports over the last several weeks and months that Khamenei was ill, like very ill. And like you said, in the last 12 to 24 hours, reports that he's actually in a coma, and that the reports are that on September 26th, he had a transition meeting. And if you remember that there was the questions of who was going to succeed Khamenei as the leader, if it was going to be Khamenei's own second son, or if it was going to be President Raisi, and President Raisi's plane crashed.
Right. I'm surprised they haven't already blamed Israel for the fact that his health is deteriorating. He's in a coma. Who knows? Well, now we're saying it's a Mossad attack. Can't trust anything.
There are still people that suggesting the conspiracy that Israel took out that helicopter, right? I mean, that's wouldn't be out of the question, but Israel certainly hasn't taken any credit for that, and it's everybody, including the Iranians, are reporting that it was a crash. But perhaps they wanted to take Raisi out of the picture for the succession plan, because many people thought that Raisi was a natural successor to Khamenei. So we don't know what's going to happen, but this is so important. This presents an opportunity for regime change, right? Just because Khamenei appoints his son to take over doesn't mean that his son is going to have the backing of the people. Doesn't mean that his son is going to have the backing of the Revolutionary Guards Corps, and it would create a unique opportunity for the Iranian people themselves and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps to say no, like, we don't accept this, and that could create a revolution. It could also be a situation in which the United States and other Western governments could say, no, we don't recognize Khamenei's son as the rightful ruler of this country, and they want to put it to some kind of a vote or something like that, and they can put all kind of pressure. So this could create like a very interesting moment of real vulnerability for Iran and that regime. And let's hope that's true, so that we can hopefully get a different regime back in place.
This is the perfect opportunity to watch this video of Prime Minister Netanyahu this week, who was talking directly to the Iranian people. This is the second time he's done this in the last several months. Let's take a look at the video. Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking to the Iranians.
Since we last spoke, the Khamenei regime launched hundreds of ballistic missiles at my country, Israel. I wonder, did he tell you how much that attack cost? Well, I'm not guessing. It's $2.3 billion. That's how much of your precious money they wasted on futile attacks. $2.3 billion. The missiles did marginal damage to Israel. But what damage did they do to you? I want you to imagine, just imagine, how your life could be different if Iran was free. You could speak your mind without fear. You could make a joke without wondering if you'd be carted off to Evin prison. Close your eyes. Picture the faces of your children, beautiful, innocent souls. Think of the endless potential they would have. Their entire lives are ahead of them. Imagine how your children's lives would look if billions of dollars were invested in them instead of being wasted on wars that can't be won. They would receive world-class education. You would receive beautiful roads, advanced hospitals, clean water. You know, Israel has the world's most advanced desalination system, and we'd be happy to help rebuild Iran's collapsing water infrastructure. These and so many other things are the things you could have. But that's what Khamenei's regime denies you every single day. They obsess about destroying Israel rather than about building Iran. What a shame. Another attack on Israel would simply cripple Iran's economy. It would rob you of many more billions of dollars. I know that you don't want this war. I don't want this war either. The people of Israel don't want this war. There is one force putting your family in grave danger: the tyrants of Tehran. That's it. But there's also good news. Every day, that regime gets weaker. Every day, Israel gets stronger. The world has seen but a fraction of our power. Yet there's one thing Khamenei's regime fears more than Israel. You know what it is? It's you, the people of Iran. That's why they spend so much time and money trying to crush your hopes and curb your dreams. Well, I say to you this: don't let your dreams die. I hear your whispers: women, life, freedom.
So the Prime Minister talking directly, this fits perfectly into the reality of the situation now in Iran, especially even if the Khamenei regime is in doubt. Netanyahu, bypassing obviously the leaders in Iran who want the Zionists, they won't even say the state of Israel destroyed, talking to the people of Iran who he doesn't view as enemies. He knows a lot of Iranians, they were actually celebrating, I remember, some fireworks, those willing to do so, when Israel killed the head of Hamas there, Khania, in Iran. So talking to the people directly.
I mean, you could ask the question, why is Netanyahu talking talking to the people of Iran.
He wants them to rise up against their regime.
Right, because you could have a lot of critics here saying, Netanyahu should spend his time talking to the people of Israel and, improving his leadership here domestically, right? It seems like he's leading the war in a very important way. Diplomatically, politically, he's making good moves, but still, like, people feel like he doesn't address them as much as he could. And here he is addressing the Iranian people. But like, as you said, it's so important. It's the Iranian people. They're the ones that ultimately overthrew the Shah. Yes, it's true that the United States pulled its backing from the Shah, like Jimmy Carter specifically pulled his backing away from the Shah, and that led to the overturning of the government, and ultimately that led to Ayatollah Khamenei coming in, Khamenei's predecessor,
in 1979.
Yeah, and 78, 79, this is the Islamic Republic came into place because of that. And Netanyahu knows history, and he knows that the Iranian people can play an important role in overthrowing this regime. And so when you talk about, again, total victory, and what does that mean? I think when it comes to Iran, it means two things. Number one is that there's no more nuclear weapons in the country, right? There's no nuclear program. It means you've taken out all of the nuclear facilities. There's no more ability to enrich uranium. There's no more ability to mass produce ballistic missiles. And the second thing is that you have more peaceful people running the country. And Iran is a country that has a proud history and a proud culture. It's not an Arabic country. Okay, there's a deep, deep history there. And before this Islamic Revolution of 1979, you saw Iran was under the Shah was a country that was becoming more and more moderate and more westernized. And I think that there's a lot of people inside Iran that would prefer that path, especially seeing the repression of this current regime. If you have to choose between repression and dictatorship, or openness and democracy, I think that a lot of Iranians would prefer the latter. So Netanyahu is appealing to that, and hopefully we'll see it happen.
Yeah, you can go online, you can go to YouTube and see what life was like before the Ayatollahs took over in 1979. Let's move on here. Again, we're talking about the last 60 days of the Biden administration, and there is a possibility that they're still going to try to damage the state of Israel. An anti-Israel UN measure might get support from the Biden administration. We saw this in the final days of the Obama administration as well. 10 non-permanent members of the UN Security Council proposed a binding resolution that would impose an end to Israel's war to root out Hamas terrorists in Gaza. There's a growing concern the Biden administration could embrace the measure to send a strong parting message to the Netanyahu government. This proposal that these non-permanent members of the UN, they're talking about a situation where resolutions passed which wouldn't even call for the release of the 101 Israeli hostages. That's how bad the resolution is. And I remember that standing ovation that those other members of the UN Security Council gave when the U.S. representative decided to abstain and allow the resolution to pass. It was against the communities of Judea and Samaria in the final weeks of Obama. We might see a repeat here at the end of the Biden term. So much going on in the last 60 days.
If you go back to that resolution, I think it was 2334, which said that the settlements in Judea and Samaria were illegal and that Israel should immediately stop building them. It wasn't just that the United States abstained. Okay, if you really look into what happened there, the United States was working with Egypt, was working with Pakistan to bring that resolution. Okay, it's not the United States is like, oh well, here's a resolution. What should we do? Let's abstain this time. Okay, these are coordinated efforts with the United States. So it is possible that the United States could do it again. This is a very dangerous 60-day period. That's why Israel's really trying to run out the clock on this 60-day period. That's why Israel's taking extra efforts to make it obvious that they're increasing the amount of humanitarian aid that they're bringing into Gaza. And we'll talk about Lebanon in a moment. It's a dangerous period. I think that President Trump can do some things, and Elise Stefanik can do some things now. That's why it's also really important that the new ambassador was appointed already. I mean, she's not confirmed yet, but it's already clear who the ambassador is going to be. And they can already lay threats, and they can tell the United Nations that if you pass a Security Council resolution against Israel, you are going to be punished in X, Y, and Z ways, which would include, I would hope, serious defunding. There's a movement there calling for the ouster of the United Nations from its beautiful beautiful real estate on the East River in New York City that it does not pay for. Okay. The United States hosts the United Nations. So there's a lot of leverage that the United States would have, Trump administration would have over the actions that are taken in these next 60 days. So we'll see if Trump uses that. We also saw at the same time, you had 88 Democratic members of Congress issuing a letter calling for the Biden administration to withhold more arms from the state of Israel. And yet, of course, President Trump said that on day one of his administration, he's going to make sure that any order to withhold weapons to the state of Israel is going to be overturned. And he's going to allow all the weapons that Israel needs to flow freely back into the country.
On that note, let's turn to the north. Let's look at Lebanon here in our last few minutes. Over the weekend, IDF struck numerous Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, including in the suburbs of Beirut. In addition, Hezbollah continues to launch almost hourly rockets and missiles at the state of Israel. Last night, it was a horrible scene. Thank God no one was hurt, but we saw an Iranian, it is an Iranian at the end of the day, but a Hezbollah missile strike a synagogue in the town of Haifa. It was Saturday night. No one was inside the synagogue, thank God.
If I saw reports, I think it was even a ballistic missile.
Last night's,
I think,
into
so.
Haifa.
I have to check that.
Earlier this week, 2 people unfortunately killed in a direct strike in the town of Nahariya, the coastal northwest tip of Israel there. They did not succeed in getting to their safe room in time. 2 people killed there. And also 7 Golani soldiers killed this week fighting in Lebanon. The IDF chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, I think he was actually in Lebanon when he made this statement, vowed that the military will continue to strike Hezbollah until displaced Israelis. We're talking about 80,000 people from the north can return to their homes. Let's jump out to the clip of IDF chief of staff Halevi.
יש לחיזבאללה מחיר מאוד גדול, שרשרת פיקוד שקרסה, הרבה מאוד פעילים הרוגים, תשתיות הרוסות. הארגון הזה ימשיך לראות, אנחנו נמשיך להילחם, נמשיך לממש תוכניות, ללכת עוד קדימה, לתקוף בעומק, לפגוע בחיזבאללה, מאוד מאוד קשה. אנחנו נעצור, שנדע שאנחנו מביאים את התושבים בביטחון.
So there you have the IDF chief of staff vowing that the war is going to continue. At the same time,
well, I think it's really important to know that this war is like raging.
Right,
it's going on about as heavily as it has since the beginning of Israel's ground invasion into southern Lebanon. Reports are that the troops are as far north as they've ever been in southern Lebanon, beyond the 5-kilometer buffer zone that they had already created. The Air Force is striking in Tyre and in southern Beirut, places that the Biden administration had been trying to prevent Israel from hitting. Now it's hitting them with impunity. And at the same time, we see that they are just continuing to fire. Now, while the IDF has in earlier phases in the war really filed down Hezbollah's capabilities. You can remember the threats. They're saying they have over 150 to 200,000 weapons, many of them long range, many of them precision guided, many of them with heavier payloads, and that the threat, what everybody was worried about was that they would start overrunning Israel's air defense systems and just be firing all over the country simultaneously. Now, it really seems as though Israel, by striking at many of the launchers, many of the long-range facilities, has managed to really reduce Hezbollah's capabilities. But they still have major capabilities, and they are firing on a daily basis, and Israel's air defenses are not able to keep up with the drones, with these missiles. And you see that there are direct strikes taking place in Nahariya, in Haifa. There was a strike in the yard of a kindergarten that miraculously didn't kill students just last week. So we see that they are continuing to fight, and this war is raging.
So if the war is raging, what do we make of talks here that Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer is literally running around perhaps with a ceasefire proposal? He was in the United States this week meeting actually with President Trump. Also reports that Russian officials are involved because of their influence in Syria.
That Dermer went to Moscow on a secret visit last week, and nobody's denied that that's the case.
So what can we say here? You know, as you just mentioned, the war is not done. There's unfinished business. Hezbollah is still firing rockets. So how and why are we talking about a ceasefire at this juncture?
Well, I think you've seen throughout the entire war, and if we move back to the Gaza arena, there has been multiple points in the conflict where there had been talks that a ceasefire was very close. Okay. And I think that what's going on here is no different. Okay. there's talks. Israel's engaging in talks because that is what the Biden administration wants Israel to do. They keep sending their envoy, Hasten, over here to broker a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. There's even some reports that the Iranians said that they might be willing to accept a Lebanon ceasefire, and that would be the end of the conflict. So this is certainly what the Biden administration wants to happen. Now, there's been reports that it's actually what the Trump administration wants, and some of the reports said that Israel was willing to do this as a gift to Trump, quotes, gift to Trump. I don't think that there's any gift to Trump here coming from a ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah.
Right.
If you see what Hezbollah has been doing right now and the war raging on, if there's a ceasefire now, that's like putting out 60% of a forest fire. Okay. You put out 60% of the forest fire and then you put your hands to you and say, oh, the job's done over here. No, the job's not done. Okay. Anybody that calls for a ceasefire right now or signs a ceasefire agreement is basically guaranteeing that Hezbollah is going to regroup and rebuild, and there's going to be another conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. Like we saw that in 2006. I mean, it took a long time, but there eventually was another conflict. And I think at this point, the way history is moving so fast, if another Democratic administration would come in 4 years, you would see in 4 years' time another conflict between Israel and Hezbollah if that Democratic administration governed the way that the previous Democratic administration.
I would argue the same thing applies to Hamas also. It would be like putting out 60% if Israel decides to go with a ceasefire right now instead of completely.
Right. So then why are they doing it? Why is now the reports are that Hezbollah is not even party to this negotiation, right? So who's negotiating with who?
Yeah.
Right. And because Hezbollah is not actually even a party to this negotiation, what you're seeing is that the state of Israel, with their number one envoy in Ron Dermer, the strategic affairs minister, who was a former Israeli ambassador to the United States, knows the administration better than anybody, knows Netanyahu and advises Netanyahu more than anybody else. They are running out the clock. Okay. They are just waiting for the Biden administration to pass. And so what they're doing is they're trying to project the image that these two administrations, the outgoing administration and the incoming administration, are aligned. Dermer's definitely trying to play one off of the other. They're saying that they want to give this as a gift to Trump, but actually what they're doing is they're just playing along with the Biden administration because of the issue that you just raised earlier, that the United States can do a lot of damage to Israel in this time. So what Israel's doing is it's feigning that it is actually, very willing to get to an end of conflict right now. Okay. And to sign a ceasefire right now. They're saying it because they're saying that that's what Trump wants. So they want to give a gift to him, right, before he comes in. But they're doing it to make sure that the Biden administration doesn't do things that are harmful to Israel in this 60-day period. And what they're warning the Biden administration is that, well, if you do any of those things, what you're doing is you're making it much more likely that we are going to engage in serious talks for a ceasefire, right? It's like, if you're going to penalize us, then we're not going to stop fighting. If you're going to gift us, then maybe we will. But I think, again, this is a strategy of running down the clock, because the second the Trump administration's in, there's going to be a lot more backing for Israel from the new administration to finish the job.
Yeah, Trump has said he does want an end to the war, but with an Israeli complete victory on all fronts. That's a major difference between what's going on now.
Trump can end the war very quickly by putting all of his backing behind Israel, by even assisting Israel with Iran and its nuclear facilities, assisting in this other arena, which we haven't really talked about, which is the Houthi arena. And I just was reading a report this week from Americans saying how much stronger the Houthis hold over Red Sea traffic actually is, and how much more sophisticated their weaponry is over there. And that's another arena that has to get taken care of. So these are areas where the United States can definitely step in and restore order. And what you want to do, again, is to end the war in a decisive Israeli victory, because a decisive Israeli victory is the only end of the war that's going to guarantee that the fighting does not resume in the near term. You want to create a situation where you can feel fairly certain that there's not going to be any other conflict between Iran, any of its proxies, and the state of Israel for the next several decades. And the second you close that war with the decisive Israeli victory, then what you're going to see is the immediate flourishing of peace with the normalization agreements that are on the table. We talked about earlier with the Saudis, with Oman, with Kuwait, with Iraq, maybe with Iran itself, maybe with Lebanon itself. Okay. There's a possibility to transform the entire region. I've said it on this podcast many times. There's two ways to transform the Middle East. Number one is to defeat the terrorists. Number two is to normalize with the moderates. There is an opportunity to do it, and to do it very fast. And I think Trump understands it because he did those things before. He sanctioned Iran more than anybody. He pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. He penalized the Palestinian Authority and all of these UN organizations that support it. And he signed the normalization agreements. I think that's what he wants. And hopefully, not only will they do it, but they should be recognized for doing it. And maybe this time around, Trump and others will get a Nobel Peace Prize for doing it.
Time will tell, and we will learn the fate of what the Trump administration will do in 60 days from now. But this is a great place to end this week's show here on Jerusalem Minute. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News, along with Alex Traiman, CEO of JNS. Make sure you go to JNS TV for all the latest programming that JNS has to offer, and go to jns.org to check out all the latest news from Israel.
And if you like these podcasts, by the way, okay, we are a reader and a viewer supported media organization. So you can click that super thanks button that's down below right under the player in YouTube. You can also go to jns.org, and there are several donation links on the top of the site and elsewhere. Go ahead, make a donation. Help us do what we've been doing since the war started. We only promise to continue doing what we're doing in a big way. And if you like this podcast, you should also know that we're building out a fantastic new studio. So we're going to move out of this conference room with the padded walls, and we're going to go into like a really nice space, which is going to very much enhance the quality of Jerusalem Minute and all of the other podcasts. And we only do that with reader support and viewer support. So click that super thanks, make a donation. We really appreciate it.
Support us. And I know that Ryan Lifshitz, our technician, and Zach Zickerman, producer, are going to be very happy with that new studio as well. Thank you to them for all their efforts. See you again next week here on Jerusalem Minute from the eternal capital of the State of Israel and the Jewish people.